Hi artists, it's Ms. Messer, your friendly neighborhood art teacher. Today, we're going to learn about one-point perspective. We're going to use what we've learned about one-point perspective to create an optical illusion using shapes. And then we're going to shade with value in a realistic way. Here's what my finished artwork looks like. Before we get started, let's talk about some vocab that you'll need to complete this project successfully. First of all is one-point perspective, which is a mathematical system of showing depth or space on a 2D surface. An optical illusion is a way to fool your eyes, and by now we should all know that value means the lightness or darkness of a color. Let's go ahead and get started with one-point perspective. Let's check out a few images of how artists use one-point perspective. Ours will be a more simplified version that uses the same ideas. So one-point perspective is a mathematical system for representing a 3D space on a 2D or flat piece of paper. It's called one-point perspective because all the lines travel back in space to meet at a single point on the horizon line. Remember that horizon line is the line that forms when the sky meets the ground. You can see the one-point perspective where I put this red arrow. Notice how all the lines are traveling back to that one point. The same is true for the second image. The landscape is drawn on a 2D surface, but it looks like it's going back in space. Again, you have one point where all the lines meet or converge. In the artwork that we are going to be creating, we're not putting in a horizon line, but you can see that all those lines are still meeting at one point right in the middle. Let's get started by getting out a ruler, pencil, and an eraser. The first thing you'll do after writing your name and class code is to put a dot in the middle of your paper. This is the point of your one-point perspective. It has the fancy name of vanishing point because that's where all the lines vanish to. After you draw your vanishing point, you will draw 7 or 8 simple geometric shapes around it in a circular shape. You can use a ruler or you can freehand your shapes, but keep them simple. Don't do anything more complex than a star. Okay, now comes the challenge. You're gonna make that vanishing point your best friend. You're gonna line up the corners of your shape with that vanishing point. Use a ruler. I will know if you don't, and it will make your artwork look sloppy. So use a ruler. Connect the closest corner of your shape directly to the vanishing point, not right next to it. Directly connect to the vanishing point. Watch as I continue to connect the closest corners to my vanishing point. Different shapes have different numbers of corners. You're gonna have to figure out how to connect each one so they look like they're popping out. They look like they're creating that optical illusion. The star I connected has a lot more corners, so I'm making quite a few lines to my vanishing point. Don't connect any of the back corners with that vanishing point, however. If you find yourself drawing through a shape, stop because it's gonna make your shapes look transparent and we want them to look solid. After you've finished in pencil, you can carefully trace over all your pencil lines with Sharpie. If you know you're someone who struggles to make straight lines, then go ahead and get that ruler out and use it again. I'm going to use it on all my lines to make sure that I'm doing the best job I can do. When you're finished tracing over your lines, you can get out some crayons to color in while using value. You're gonna have to use your imagination a little bit as you color in. You're gonna pretend that there's a sun shining down on the top of your shapes. And as you go further down on the lines that you've created, you're getting further from the sun. So it's gonna get darker. You can create this sense of value by shading the top slightly and getting darker as you shade down to increase the optical illusion that your shapes are 3D. As a last step, I used a little of the complementary color to add some extra darkness at the bottom towards my vanishing point, remembering that that's where my darkest colors are. Then I went ahead and carefully cut it out. Oops, made a mistake, we'll fix that later. Okay, let's move on to talk about how we're gonna do our backgrounds. I'm gonna use paint to demonstrate this, which will be available to students who've been working with quiet focus. Otherwise, you can use oil pastels. Today we're using what's called an analogous color scheme. We need our old pal, the color wheel, to help us out on this one. An analogous color scheme is 3 or 4 colors that are next to each other on the color wheel. Because they are next to each other, they blend together well and create a sense of visual harmony. For my background, I chose yellow-green, green, blue-green, and blue. After making sure my name and class code are on the back of my background sheet, I can start using the analogous color scheme to paint my background. Notice how I'm blending the colors together. I'm not just painting lines or stripes, I'm mixing the colors together to create new colors. You could do the very same thing if you're working with oil pastels. When my work is dry, I can glue the 2 parts together, again making sure my name and class code is on it so I can get my grade. All right guys, let's get to work.